Okay. Without further ado, let's bring Gary in.
Hello.
Hi, Gary. How you doing?
Hi. I'm good, thank you.
Good stuff. Right. We're all set up. We're live and we're ready
Okay.
to go.
Okie dokie. Let's go it.
Okay. So, firstly, Gary, I just want to say, a big thank you for agreeing to take some time out of your day to come on and have a chat with us reprobates. I know obviously Twitch isn't really your sort of scene, but honestly, if you could see some of the people in the chat, just the last 5 minutes alone, I think it would be, but we'll say most illuminating.
Right. Okay. Okay. The mind boggles, but yeah.
Bow Street, however, is in the chat. She says hello.
Hi. Yeah. Hello back.
So, like I say, first and foremost, thank you for agreeing to come on.
You're welcome.
Obviously we had a bit of a chat there before I went live. And although obviously, like I say, Andy's Man Club, it's not something that I have yet to have the pleasure of experiencing. It is something that,
Yep.
it's the whole idea of it is something that really hits home with myself, being a man that has been through mental health issues in the past. So to have the opportunity to be able to speak to somebody that's so directly involved as yourself, it's a really big pleasure. Oh, very quiet. PJ, are you talking about me, Gary, or both? Let me just have a quick look on the sound settings. No, everything's turned up as high as it can go. Let's maybe turn desktop audio up a bit. I can hear both clearly. Oh, okay, fair enough. So Gary, if you don't mind, why don't you start us off by telling us a bit about yourself and your background?
A bit about me. I was a prison officer for 30 years. I first joined the prison service in 1989 after following my dad into the job. And I suppose really from very early in my career, I developed an interest around mental health and suicide and self-harm really through my job. It was part of everyday occurrences within prisons, and that's what I did. And I did 30 years, and sort of like the end of it is where everything started for me, really, around mental health. I was working at Peterborough Prison. I was the head of suicide self harm. So, I was a safer custody manager, as they called it. And I developed a real interest in it. And I had the pleasure of meeting Luke Ambler. And Luke is the founder of Andy's Man Club.
Oh, okay.
And I met Luke at a prison service conference where he did a talk to all the managers that were there, and I've never witnessed anybody hold an audience of probably 200, 250 prison service managers of all ranks and seniorities like he did. He just was a massive inspiration. And we had a chat, and I invited him to Peterborough, and he came to Peterborough and did a staff meeting. And normally, staff meetings are, just the most boring thing in the world ever. And to try and get staff to attend is always difficult, and whatever else. We managed to get the number one governor to agree to it being almost like a 3-line whip. You had to attend if you had to have a really good reason not to, which meant that the meeting hall was packed. And Luke did his talk, and he's very forthright, Luke. He doesn't apologize for the language he uses. He says it as it is. He talks about it as he is, and he had the whole place mesmerized because of the way he spoke and the talk he gave. And that was then where my interests around Andy's Man Club started. I was starting to go through my own issues by this stage. I have a chronic eye condition, which causes me quite a lot of discomfort at times, and can cause me periods of time where I can't see properly. So, working within a prison environment, that became quite problematic.
Yeah.
And to start with, when I was first diagnosed with it, I had great support. I had really good support from managers and from my manager, and everything sort of like just kept moving on. And then I changed managers. I got a new manager and a new manager's manager, so one above me, or two above me, and that's when all my issues started, because they were just completely the opposite. No support, nothing at all. Um, at this stage, I'd already started an Andy's Man Club group in Peterborough, so which was where I was working. I didn't live in Peterborough, but I worked in Peterborough,
Yeah.
and we started a group there, and that's still going today. That's took off, and it is really strong and going. And then I went through all my issues, and in the end, caused me to make a mistake at work, caused me to lose my job, through stress and anxiety and lack of support. I always admitted that I made a mistake. I held my hands up straight away. I never tried to cover it up. I never tried to deny it at all, and whatever else. But it was not, in sort of my opinion and lots of other people's opinions, it wasn't a life threat. It was just a stupid mistake.
Yeah.
A poor decision that I made at the time. Didn't cause any injury, didn't cause any loss of life, nothing like that at all, but they decided that they got everything they wanted, threw the book at me, and they got rid of me. They sacked me just like that on the spot,
Wow.
after. So, 30 years, you kind of think your world's come to an end, and you think, what do I do now? And I was lucky because, I had a fantastic partner who's now my wife, two great stepchildren, brilliant family as well, my immediate family, and had support, because I went through hell. I really did. To the point of, suicidal thoughts. Sat at Peterborough railway station for 2 hours, um, thinking there has to be more to life than this. There has to be. This life can't just be like this all the time. And whatever else. And fortunately, I made a decision and rang my sister and said, I don't know what to do. I don't know, what. And she wanted to know where I was. And I told her, and she said, right, get on the next train home. I'll meet you at the station.
Yeah.
Which I did. And between me doing that and getting home, she'd made an appointment at the doctor's for me, took me I went to my doctors, and they were superb. They sort of sorted everything out, helped me through it all. My partner and everyone else helped me through it all, and I came out of it better. um you know um and sort of like in that time, I then moved to Huntingdon to move in with my partner. We and so my interest then was to start a group locally here, which I did. So I went through all the startup process again. I handed over my group in Peterborough to good hands, to be well looked after, and which is quite hard for me, because I'm quite a bit of a control freak. If I need to know what's going on all the time. It's not that I don't trust people. I just, when something's mine and I started it, I want to know what's going on and what decisions are being made and all of that. But eventually, I managed to break loose from it, and then started a group in Huntingdon that, we've been going for just over a year now, and it's going from strength to strength. It's growing, as is the charity as a whole. Sandy's Man Club is a charity, so
Yeah.
it was a bit of a journey, and it still is a bit of a journey. But it was. And the beauty with Andy's Man Club is all the facilitators at all the groups have also been through it. So they've been through all the issues and everything else. So they can genuinely sit there and say to guys who are struggling, I know how you feel.
Yeah.
And that means a lot to people, because I had counselling. I went through counselling for periods of time and whatever else. Can't honestly say it worked for me. I just felt it was a tick box. It was a tick box exercise. They were sat there with a book. They asked, they had to ask certain questions. had no idea who I was, didn't know me from Adam, and saw me, once, I don't know what it was, once a fortnight or whatever, and it really didn't work for me. And I know counselling works for some people, I'll never, different things work for different people. It didn't work for me. And lots of the guys that come to Andy's Man Club combine both. They use counselling they find really good, but they find Andy's, equally as powerful. So yeah, so it's hell of a journey, hell of a journey.
Yeah, and I
So,
think it's just touching on what you said there. It's one of those things that unfortunately, situations like that, it's not an exact science. Something
no,
that works for one person isn't then necessarily going to work for somebody else because then, well,
no,
would have figured the problem by now.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, we would, and that's the thing with it is, and that's what I say to people. Andy's Man Club doesn't work for everybody. It is a group chat situation. It is, we do sit round in a circle. We work on questions each week and stuff like that. And that doesn't work for some people. Don't want, and that's fine. I acknowledge that. It doesn't happen. But within the area I'm in, there are a number of organisations that are there to help men. Things are growing and stuff like that, and we work very closely together because it doesn't make any difference to me what organisation somebody goes to or what works for someone as long as they go to somebody. And that's with it. I'm not saying, well, you need to come to me because I need my numbers up. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me whether I get one person or 100 people. Doesn't
yeah,
matter. It's that one person. If one person comes, then I'm helping one person. So and that's what it works for. So yeah,
yeah, and I think a big part of again, just touching on what you've just sort of explained there, a big part of what I like the sound of is, like you say, the fact that all the facilitators, and this going to sound a little bit worse than what I intended to, but
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
facilitators are all people that have been there and experienced
yeah,
similar situations themselves. Because from my own personal lives, when I was suffering, um, well, I say when I was suffering, when I was at the height of my issues, a big thing for
yeah,
me was this whole feeling of dread of there's no point in me speaking to anybody because nobody understands. No one
yeah,
no one quite gets just where I am in my own mind right now or why I'm in that sort of
yeah.
position.
Yeah.
Um, which is a very, I
And,
found, dangerous sort of mentality to have. Although I do believe it is a natural kind of thing. When you first start
yeah,
experiencing things like that, it is you go to. Nobody understands, nobody knows what
tens.
I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Um,
And the problem with it is, a lot of the time you don't either.
exactly.
So and that's the hardest thing I always had was to try to explain. I always say to people, there's a very 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 big difference between sadness and depression.
Yeah.
I said because I know why I'm sad. I understand that because you're normally sad because of an event that's happened. That's natural, through whether that be through grief, through death, through anything. There's a reason behind sadness. The problem you have with depression is very often you can't find the reason. You can't understand. I always use an example when I was coming out of mine and starting to get, better. Although you're never, having depression is a bit like being an alcoholic.
Mm.
Once you've had depression, you're always vulnerable to it. You're always, there. It's always in the background. And
Yeah.
I went away on holiday with my family, with my wife and my two boys, and we'd been camping for a week in Norfolk, and we'd had a fantastic week, really good week. We couldn't have asked for better weather, and it was superb. And we were due to come home on the Saturday, and on the Friday, I just woke up like a big black cloud was over me.
Yeah.
And for no reason. There's absolutely no rationale behind that. So, I sat down, I talked it through because very good at talking through with my wife. I've learnt that one. I learnt the power of talk. And and we worked it out that actually what happens is when I've come to the end of something that's really good, I know it's coming to an end, I crash.
Yeah.
I come down because I just think, oh, we're just back to normality. Then we go home on Saturday, we're back to normality on Sunday, and it's back to normal life on Monday, kind of thing. And we had to work out a strategy to stop that, to sort of like counteract that effect. But it takes a long while to work that out, because it's really hard when you say, when you're trying to explain to somebody how you feel, but you don't understand why you feel like you do, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. It's so difficult. It's so hard to say to somebody, I'm feeling crap, but I have no idea why. And that is, that's the biggest battle. And the biggest battle for people is, and I think the biggest feedback we get from guys from group is that it makes them realize they're not alone,
Yeah.
because it's that huge feeling of loneliness when you're depressed and and you have anxiety. Everything becomes a battle, everything is an effort, and you feel like you must be the only person in the world that's suffering like this. And that the biggest sort of like help for guys is when they suddenly realize they're not,
Yeah.
and that's the important part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was
So
that was a mistake that I sort of made. Was, like you say, sort of thinking that I was on my own with it. There was no point speaking with anybody else because nobody's going to understand. Like you say, I very much thought, well, if I don't understand what's going on in my own head, how is anybody else supposed to figure it out? If I can't work it out myself, nobody else is going to have a clue.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
which did leave me feeling, very isolated, very much on my own, like it was sort of me against the world. And I, I think a part of it was also a very old fashioned sort of mentality, which I think is one of the big problems, which I'll come back to in a moment. But it was this mentality of, well, my issues are my issues. Everybody else has got their
yeah.
things that they've got going on. I don't want to add to that and burden anybody else with my
No,
problems. And the
no,
biggest thing, and I sort of touched on this one on last week's podcast actually, but the biggest thing that
yeah.
somebody ever said to me that made me think, you know what, maybe I do need to start being a bit more open and speaking to people. A good friend of mine who I used to play pool with, John. Now, there's quite a large age gap between me and John. John's actually older than my father. um,
Yeah.
but to summarise mine and John's history, I met John when I was 17 years old. So this was, going on for 16 years ago now. Playing pool together, and it just kind of stuck from there. And because of the age gap, it was very much a sort of father-son kind of relationship. We've always had that sort of tight bond. And John knows me inside out. He in some regards he knows me better than I know me.
Yeah, yeah,
And at the time that I was in my darkest and I wasn't speaking to anyone and I sort of alienated myself. He sends me a text message. It was a Saturday afternoon. I'll never forget this one. It's a Saturday afternoon, and he says, "Right, come on, it's Saturday. Let's get down to the boozer. We'll have a couple of beers. We'll have a few games of pool, and then you're going to talk to me and you're going to tell me what's going on." So at first, I'm trying to say no, I'm not up for it, and he just wouldn't take no for an answer. He was determined that I was coming out. So
yeah,
I had a couple of beers, had a few games of pool, started to open up to him a little bit, and I just ended up telling him everything that was going on. What I was feeling, what what I had going on in my life that was sort of beating me up and whatnot. So he then says to me, look, you know the story, Liam. You're like a son to me. There's nothing that you can't come and tell me. Why haven't you said anything? And I've said, well, exactly as I've just said there. I says, well, you've got your own stuff going on, John. I'm not going to add to your issues by dumping all of my stuff at your door and expecting you to make it better for me. And he came out with possibly the single most powerful statement that I've ever had somebody say to me directly. He says, Liam, I'd rather take an hour or two out of my day to listen to your story and listen to your troubles than have to spend an hour or two of my day hearing your obituary. And that
Yeah,
really
yeah,
hit me. That, that's something that I've carried around with me since that day, because
yeah.
it was a really powerful thing for him to say to me, especially given, the relationship between us.
Yeah, it's massive, and it's the little things you remember. I always think, when I lost my job and I thought the world had come crashing down, and whatever else. And after I'd had, all my disciplinary stuff and all of that, I got a phone call and a letter from my solicitors and whatever else, and they said, right, we need to appeal.
Mm,
And they gave me a list of 12 things that I could have appealed on because it was so badly handled. It was atrocious
yeah.
and whatever else. And I just turned around and said, not interested. I
Mm,
don't want to. And they said, well, why? I said, because I'm tired. I've had enough of fighting these people. I don't want to be somewhere where I'm not wanted.
yeah.
I said, what would I do? I said, the worst thing that could possibly happen to me now is I get my job back. I said, I don't want to do that. I said, I drove home. I didn't. My sister, bless her heart, she'd waited for me outside and drove as we were driving back home. I said to her, why do I feel like I've got a massive weight lifted off my shoulder? I said, my world has just been ripped apart, yet I feel so much better.
Mm,
And she said, because it's all over, it's finished. You haven't got to be, have any interaction now with these people again. You don't have to do that. And it took me a while to persuade my oldest sister and my mum. My dad understood it. My dad got it, which surprised me. But they didn't understand why I wouldn't appeal. And then, and after sort of like a couple of weeks, and my mum turned around to me and she said, "Do you know what?" She said, "It's the best thing that ever happened to you because you've been unhappy for so long."
yeah.
And you kind of think when your 80-year-old mum says that to you, you kind of think there's a lot of truth in that, isn't there? There's a lot in that, and I'm fortunate. Like I said, I'm so much more fortunate than lots of other people. With my family around me. I got married 2 years ago. I'd never been married. My first marriage. I never ever thought that I would get married. I never thought that I've got two stepkids, two brilliant stepkids. Who are just my world. And my wife is my world. And you just think, I never thought that would happen to me. I'm 54 years old. I'm not a kid, but it's like my life has started again. And you kind of think, okay, so maybe I won't have as long as I thought I would have had, but let's make the most of it. And
Yeah.
it's and I'm I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form at all, but I strongly believe in fate. I've always believed in fate and believed that everything happens for a reason, and things are done, to do it. And I part of mine when I look back and I've sat and thought a lot about my past and all of that. I realised I'd probably been depressed for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And I lived on my own for a long time, for most of my life since I left home. I've had periods of times where I've shared houses, but most of the time I've lived on my own. And things like and I got a cycle of depression, and that depression would be counteracted by I'd spend money that I didn't have. I had a good job and well paid, so credit was easy. And the problem with it is you have credit, you have to pay it back.
Yeah.
And and part of the things when everything came crashing down around me, it was actually quite an eye opener, really, because I found out, I owed a lot of money, and I realised actually companies are not sort of like after you all the time. Because if you're honest with them and you tell them I haven't got anything, I don't have any money, they, they're fine. They don't want it, And I managed to sort it all out. And I went to a financial I went for a financial advisor, and I always remember what he said to me. He said, never ever lose sleep about owing money, because I owed, probably in the region of 20 grand to Barclaycard. That was one of my debts.
Yeah.
He said, never worry about that. He said, because they'll get their money. That's what they've got insurance for. He said,
Yeah.
they're not going to lose 20 grand. They don't lose 20 grand to bad debt.
Thank you.
He said, that's what they're insured for. It's the insurance company that lose the money, not them. So he said, never, and I've sorted it, and I now don't even earn enough to pay tax. And I love that. I love the fact that when I get my pay slip every month, my tax says nil because I don't earn enough. And the silly things that make you think, actually, I've paid enough tax. I've gone from earning nearly 50 grand a year to earning less than 11 now.
Yeah.
But I probably have more disposable income now than I ever had when I earned 50 grand a year, because everything I earned, I owed. So, it was just swings and roundabouts. And now it's, and I do a job where I teach kids to ride bikes. I love cycling anyway. So my hobby has become my job. How better can that be? To actually enjoy going to work every day. I work in a different school every week. So, if I don't like the school, or if I find a kid I don't like, it don't matter, because I've only got to put up with them for a week, and then I'm in another school the next week. So so I look at it now and I think, life's pretty good. Life's pretty good now, and it's now time for me to start helping others and giving. I still have my bad days, don't get me wrong. I still have moments when I struggle. We've had a period of stuff where things have gone. Our boiler went wrong, and then our central heating pump went wrong, and then something else, and then the car, and then the fence came down in the wind. And you think everybody just, all the time it's just money. But my wife says, yeah, okay, but we'll sort it.
Yeah.
We'll sort it. It doesn't matter, and it kind of makes you realise that, I've realised very quickly there's more to life than money. Very quickly, very much
100%.
so. Although, okay, so I appreciate for lots of people it's very difficult at the moment. Like, it's for all of us. The cost of living is just phenomenal. But, I actually think, okay, so I've got a house and it will be warm, because I won't live in a cold house. That's not going to happen. So we cut back other ways and in other places. But, being able to help people and being in that position with Andy's, and other groups that we've involved in locally, it kind of gives me the opportunity to see other people go on the same journey that I've been on. So,
Yeah.
it's it's good. It's good.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the issues that people sort of face when they are having difficult times is we tend to, and I don't necessarily believe that this is just specific to people that are experiencing mental health issues either. I think this is just people in a general. A lot of the time we tend to focus on what we haven't got and want, as
Yeah.
opposed to what we actually have got. Which
Yeah.
again, at my worst times, that was something that I couldn't get out of my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to put a brief story on it, basically my main issues began a good couple of years ago when my relationship with my son's mother broke down. And then it's just always been the same. A typical sort of story, but a lot of my issues stem from failed relationships. But then it's not necessarily been the relationship breaking down that causes me the issues. It's how I then see myself afterwards that has then been the cause of my
Yeah.
issues. Because then
Yeah.
I'll start
Yeah.
picking myself apart and, this is wrong and that's wrong. But a lot of the time, I was, I'd be laying in bed and I'm thinking, I'm in my 30s now. This isn't where I was supposed to end up. I'm in a one-bedroom flat. My son doesn't live with me, unfortunately. I'm focusing on all these different things that I thought that by this point in my life I'd have. Because we all sort of have the dream growing up, when we're
Yeah, of
in our
course we do.
teens and whatnot, and we think, yeah, when I'm 30-year-old, I'm going to be earning X amount, I'm going to be in my dream job, I'm going to be married with X amount of children. And especially this day and age, it's very seldom that it actually works out like that. There are people that are lucky enough that, they get all of that. But for the majority of us, you've got to sort of adapt. And that's what I was really focusing on. This isn't how it was supposed to turn out. And when I actually took a step back and I looked at things from the outside looking in, realistically speaking, like, okay, I'm not necessarily where I planned to be at this stage in my life, but that doesn't mean that where I am is necessarily bad. I'm in a well paid
Yeah.
job
Well,
that
yeah.
is, fingers touch wood. I've just finished my first full year. Touch wood, it is going to stem into, a very long and rewarding career. Um, Sort of similar to what you said yourself there, Gary. Part of my job is I help people, and it's funny that you
Mm.
mentioned debt because that's what I do for a living. I work for a debt
Yeah.
solutions
Mm.
company, so I basically my job is to help people get out of debt.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's stories where you hear of people that, without going too much into it, it's people that have just been silly with the money. You get people that they're just not paying what they owe and they've got no intentions of doing it, etc., etc. But then you will hear people that come through to you who are just victims of circumstance, and that for me is where the most rewarding part is. When you help people that haven't necessarily done anything wrong, or they've not been necessarily budgeting their money wrong or anything at all like that. They are just pure victims of circumstance. That for me is where I get a lot of job satisfaction, because then I then go home at night thinking, you know, Natalie with her 3 kids that was on the phone to me before in floods of tears because she's having to pay £500 a month out that she hasn't got. And now I've just made it possible for her. I've put this plan in place and I've reduced the payments to that. And she's now come off that phone knowing that her situation is now manageable and she's
That's
going to
good.
be able to get
Yeah.
by. There's a lot of it's a very rewarding kind of feeling.
And I've always said that, it's the best when I finally got all mine sorted out. And I had, I went down the lines of an IVA because it was, I owed so much and it was the easiest way to, and all I say to my wife, I pay, £26 a week. I said, as long as on a Friday there's £26 in my bank, that's all I'm interested in.
Yeah,
As long as that gets paid, or I don't have anything else, I don't have credit. I have no credit cards. I don't even have an overdraft on my bank account anymore. And whereas previously I lived on my overdraft. My overdraft, as soon as my wages went in, they were gone. And
yeah,
then the money I lived on all week, all month was an overdraft. And I don't have any of that anymore. And I look at my bank and think, yeah, I can go for a coffee today because I've got enough left in my bank to do it. If I haven't, I don't go.
yeah,
I think, no, I won't go for a coffee. I'll come home and have one. And it's silly things like that you actually realise. And I think, like you said, massively, I think the thing we need to get people to do is look at what you've got,
yeah,
not what you've not got. Because we see too much now as being, social pressure and media pressure to have everything and do everything. And you sit watching the adverts. We my wife said tonight we were watching the telly earlier, and there was an advert for holidays, and they were saying holidays from this, and she said these adverts drive me mad because these adverts are not when the kids are off school. These
yeah,
adverts are when just when there's no kids are at school, so no one can go anyway. And it's she said it, but I said we just have to look at what we have. We work out the little
Thank
things.
you.
What have I got? I've got a roof over my head. I've got a fantastic wife, 2 great kids, a lovely family. Fortunate, both of my parents, although elderly, they're still alive. And I look at what I've got and think, actually, yeah, I'm a bit like you. Yeah, I'd love the Aston Martin in the garage and the £1 million house and what. But would I?
yeah,
But would I really? Would I be any happier if we've got a small 3 bedroom house, and we struggle for space sometimes, and I think would we be any happier in a bigger house? Probably not. We just have more rooms to mess up, and that's kind of and I just think that we have to take a backward step. And I do think, I don't read newspapers. I haven't read a newspaper for years. I look at the news and I follow the news, but and I use social media, but I try to use social media in a positive way, because I think if things like social media, if they're used properly, are extremely powerful tools. They're also
Yeah.
very dangerous tools, because they are, it's. I wouldn't want to be a kid today. I wouldn't
No.
want to be growing up today. I'm glad in a way, that I've done my growing up. I wouldn't want to be growing up today, because, the pressures. I've got a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old, and the pressures that they have, especially the younger one. Social media pressure is phenomenal all the time. It never stops. And it's hard work, and I think that pressure on top of, if you're not feeling great as an individual, if you're struggling as an individual, all of that extra pressure, that extra stuff, really, I completely get why it weighs people down. I look at it and think, I can understand that,
Yeah.
because we are just, it's a difficult world that we live in. So,
100%, yeah. And the other side for me, going back to what you said there about, when you yourself have seen in the past, people with the big houses and the nice big flash Aston Martins and whatnot, and you think, oh gosh, I'd love to have that. And then you question, would I? Personally speaking, and obviously from my personal point of view, um, I can sit here now and come out with a statement like that, yeah, I'd love this big house and this big car. But then if I really think about it and I put myself in that situation, yes, I'd enjoy those things, but would I then be happy with what I've got? Probably not, because, I've then got what I wanted. So I'm going to then look at something that I haven't got and I'm going to want that.
yeah,
So let's say
yeah,
I could have a big 4-bedroom house, for example, and then I'm going to think, well, all right, I want a 6-bedroom. I want a games room, or I want X, Y, and Z. It's always
yeah.
wanting what you haven't got as opposed to focusing on what you have. Um,
Yeah.
and
And I
like I
think you
said,
see that, because I think you see that when you look at people that have got everything, they always want more.
yeah,
They're always like, I think actually they can have nothing. Everything's is all materialistic. Everything in their world is materialistic. It's not about, oh, I've just repaired that. I've just fixed that so it lasts a bit longer. And you think actually, we've got two cars. We're a two-car family,
yeah,
but our bigger car, my car, we had a problem with it, 3 or 4 weeks ago. We kind of decided, we set a limit. It went to the garage. If it's more than this to fix,
hmm,
we're not going to fix it. We'll just scrap it. It wasn't, fortunately. But then we went through the process of working out, how can we cope? What can we do to manage as a one-car family? Rather than think, actually, we've got to find the money to buy another car. Because, we sat down and I said, actually, if you think about it, if we only had one car, that's only one lot of insurance. That's one lot of MOT, one lot of servicing, rather than two all the time,
yeah,
because it doubles all the while, but fortunately we didn't have to. It was fixed relatively, cheaply, and within what we'd said we would do it. And we actually both turned around and said, isn't it nice to sit here and have an adult conversation about it, and not just go, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. And you kind of think, I think, sometimes I think that's probably what's wrong with the world. Everybody wants, we all look up to these people, or lots of, I personally don't, but lots of people look up to all these people. You know, I use footballers as the example. That are
yeah,
paid all this ridiculous amount of money. I think, actually, are they really happy?
hmm,
If you took football away from them, would they be really happy?
yeah.
Probably not.
And
Yeah,
that's the big question. Just really quickly,
yeah,
actually,
yeah.
and I expect you'll like hearing this. Just while we've been sat here chatting away, we have actually had 2 donations come in, for
Oh,
my
excellent.
Andy's Man Club Just Giving page. Donation number one, Aaron, or as a Smith in 92, £20 donation with the message, "This is truly inspiring." Aaron, thank you very much.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you very much.
and then we have got Shanky, the big boy, with the £80 plus £20 gift
Wow.
aid. Shanky, thank you ever so much, man. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's
also
phenomenal.
there's been a couple of messages posted in chat as well. Um,
Yeah,
and do you know what? I think just the messages in chat alone sort of show the true power that Andy's Man Club is promoting. There've been so many messages in the chat about how inspiring sitting here listening to this is, and it's just two blokes having a chat. And I think
yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
sort of proves the point that just sitting and having that conversation, the power that that can have is unreal.
I think the one thing that I have really learned through my work with Andy's Man Club is about the power of talk.
Yeah,
That the power it is just so powerful. So if I tell you a little bit about the history of Andy's Man Club, I mentioned briefly earlier about Luke Ambler is the guy who started Andy's Man Club, and Luke started it after his brother-in-law Andy Roberts took his own life. 23 years old, had a quite a problematic life. Andy had, he'd been in and out of prison a couple of times, but he appeared to be turning his life around. He got a young daughter, and whatever else. But he had a massive argument with his partner and whatever else. And one evening took himself into a local park area in Halifax and hung himself. And from the fallout of that, Luke, who was his brother-in-law, and Elaine, Andy's mum, um, came up with the idea of Andy's Man Club,
yeah,
and because they realised very quickly that there's very few places for guys to go and talk. We don't talk about how we're feeling. You go down the pub with your mates, you talk about the football, you talk about this, and if someone asks you if you're okay, your answer always is, "Yeah, I'm fine."
yeah.
Because actually, do they really mean it, or are they the person that I want to open my heart to? If they the people I want to, and it's really difficult. So they started Andy's Man. The first Andy's Man Club took place in September of 2016. 9 guys in Halifax met. That was the first night, the first Monday night. We always meet on a Monday night because it was a Monday that Andy took his life.
Yeah.
So that's the reason behind the Monday. On Monday of the week just gone, there were 118 groups across the country. About 2,650 guys met, 252 of them for the first time. And that's where it's come in 7 years. That's where we've grown to. From 9 guys in 2016 to 2,650 guys on Monday just gone this week.
That's
So
phenomenal.
it's phenomenal. And it is such a simple format. We work, like I said, it's about tea and biscuits, tea and cake, tea and whatever we've got in for refreshments. And we have 5 questions every week. The first question is always, "How's your week been?" We go, everybody answers that. You go around and answer that. And then we have positive from the week. And then we have the rant. So anything you want to get off your chest, anything that's pissed you off in the week, this is what I need. And lots of the guys they'll think, okay, I've dealt with that, but I can deal with that on Monday. Get that off my chest on Monday, and
Yeah.
and deal with it. And then we have question 4 and 5, which are different every week, and they can go from, you're going on a road trip, you've got 3 spare seats in your car. Who do you invite?
Ooh,
Could be anybody, dead or alive. You can invite whoever you like. It's going to be your 4 people. That gets people talking. And then we'll have questions about, what's your favourite sandwich? That's one of our group's favourite questions. What's your favourite? Because we have a longer debate about what actually is a sandwich, before we decide what our favourite sandwich is. And that's the idea of it, is to get people talking.
yeah.
And we have said, I always remember one night when I was in Peterborough, and we had the banner on the window outside, Andy's Man Club. Um, uh, mental health group, suicide for men, help group. Well, I can't remember what the banner says exactly. And we were all in tears of laughter. And somebody said, if someone walked past the door now and looked through that, and they say, well, that can't be the suicidal group, can it? Look at them all, because of something someone had said,
Yeah.
it just got everybody going. And that's what it's about. And you watch guys go, and I just find it quite phenomenal now when I sit and look around the room. You know, I've got four other facilitators who work with me. So some weeks I'll just sit back and let them do it. I think, actually, I'm just going to watch. I'm just going to watch and listen to everything that's going on. And I look at where some of the guys have gone in the journeys that they've had, you know, and the way they deal with their issues now to how they would have dealt with them 12 months ago is just, you know, it's humbling, to
Yeah,
say the least. Yeah.
I can imagine it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, and like you say, for that kind of growth over,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
really, quite a relatively short period of time for
Yeah.
such a big growth.
And it's
That's
grown.
fantastic.
Yeah, and bear in mind when you take into account we had 2 years of COVID in that. You
Yeah,
know, so
true.
we had a period of time where we couldn't meet at all. So we met purely online. So every group went online. So
Yeah,
we met via Zoom meetings every week, which kept it going, but didn't work for everybody. You know, because if somebody's problems are in the home, then you know sitting and talking in the home about the home doesn't work. You know, it wasn't a safe place for them to talk, but it kept it going.
yeah,
And you know, the beauty of that when we came out of COVID and we went back to meeting again in person was we kept an online group. So not only do we have 118 in-person groups, we also have an online group that meets every week. So if you're not in an area where there is a group, or if you're somebody who for social anxiety reasons or whatever else doesn't get out of the house, can't, you know, you can still meet because you can just go online and do it. You
yeah.
know, and that was the bonus of COVID, because that would never have happened without COVID, because we would never have gone online, so we'd have never explored the possibility of it. So, you know, that's kind of taking the plus out of what was a pretty crap couple of years. You know, so yeah,
No, of course. And
but
I think for me personally, going back to obviously the power of talk.
yeah,
I think the reason why now I'm a lot more open than what I
yeah,
used to be is the fact that, you know, and I'm not saying this is the same with every single example, but a lot of the time for me, just sitting there and putting voice to what it is that's going on in my head. Um,
yeah,
I mean, firstly, it takes a massive weight off because it's no longer just something that I've potentially just created in my head. You know, I've put a voice to it, I've put it out there. Um,
yeah,
and the other one is, you know, sometimes getting somebody else's perspective on things it can make you realize that maybe, you know, this image that you've created in your head, this scenario that you've thought up, isn't actually as bad as what you may think. And the most recent time that worked for me was I want to say about 2 months ago now. I found something out that it basically crippled me. Um, you know, it really hit me for six. And I remember going into work that morning, um, and I'd messaged my manager to say, you know, I wasn't in the best of moods. So, you know, if I'm not as chatty or what have you, you know, this is why. So I goes into work and he says, right, you know, come and have a chat with me. And I just opened up and told him everything. So the lad that I was chatting to, Oliver, his name is, he's a very logical kind of thinker. So he sat me down and he says, right, okay, you know, he sympathised with what was going on. He'd been through something similar, and he basically says, right, what about your situation can you control? And I said, well, nothing. You know, unfortunately, there's absolutely nothing that I can do about it. So he says, okay, so let's have a look and see what we can do. Then let's see what we can do that's maybe not going to change the situation, but change your approach to it. So we sat down, we had a big chat. Um, on the back of that, I started going back to the gym, which has made me feel, you know, a lot better within myself.
yeah,
And after the first couple of weeks, you know, focusing on the areas in my life that I weren't happy with that I could control, you know, performance in work, my own physical health, all of a sudden, you know, these areas that there was nothing that I could do about, they all of a sudden didn't seem as bad because
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not focused
yeah.
as much on it. I'm focused on something totally
No,
different.
It's one of the things that I always say to people that I've learned, and I always try to encourage other people is don't worry about the things you can't control.
Mm.
I know it's easy. It sounds really easy when you say that, but if you actually sat down like you did and actually think, okay, what can I control in this situation? What can I control? I control how I feel. I can control how healthy I am. I can do all of that, and then everything else just sorts itself out
Yeah.
because you stop worrying about the things you can't control. It's like, we I had this conversation with my wife with all the with the fuel crisis and the cost of living crisis and whatever else, and I was genuinely quite concerned about it. I said, because I shouldn't be having to decide at 54 years of age whether I can heat my house or feed my kids. I said that shouldn't be a decision I'm having to make. I said that's just, to me, is completely immoral. That
Yeah.
really is a world and a society that's gone completely lost it, that's totally lost it. And we sat and had this conversation, and she said, we won't do that. She said, because we are really good with how we shop. Our heating bills, it scares me what some people pay because I don't know how they do it. I don't know what they do to pay as much money as they do when I think my house is never cold.
Yeah.
I don't, I said, and actually, when we had that comment again, we did the adult thing. We talked about it. I got my concerns and my what she said. Don't worry about it. If we need to put the heat on, we will put the heat on. If
Yeah.
we don't need to put the heat on, we'll turn it off. And she said, and that's the really important thing. It's like when you talk to people and you ask people. I'll always say to people, if you're going to ask someone if they're okay, ask them twice. Always ask them twice because you'll always get the first answer you'll get is, yeah, I'm fine. And then ask them, are you really okay? Because then they'll start to realize you really mean it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is make sure you've got time for the answer. Because if you're not prepared for the answer and someone goes to talk and you say, how would you have felt if you'd have gone to your manager and your manager just said, oh, come on, let's have a chat. And you'd have opened up and said, oh, we haven't got time for this. I've got a meeting.
Yeah.
You'd
Exactly.
have thought, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
What,
Why
what,
have
what
I
was the
just
point
done
of me
that?
opening up? I've now got something else to worry about because I've told you half a story. You're going to go off and make up the other half. And I'm in a worse situation than I was. And although talk is powerful, it's also making sure it's the right time in the right place. So
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I think one of the other thing that I really like about the idea of Andy's Man Club is, talking about our own personal experiences. Um, and in one aspect, I'd say both you and I have been quite lucky in the respect that, when we have struggled, we have had the support network around us. I'm very
yeah,
blessed
yeah,
to say that I've got a fantastic network of support around me, many of which are in the chat right now. There's several
mm,
people there that are chatting away among themselves that I know full well that if I really needed to, I could say, listen,
yeah,
have you got a bit of time? I really need to speak to somebody. And they would give me that time. But
yeah,
unfortunately, not everybody is that lucky. Not everybody has got somebody that, in the hardest times they can turn to and be like, listen, I've got this going on, I've got that going on. Um, and for me, that is something, my sort of viewpoint on it is that something that an organisation like Andy's Man Club can provide. The
yeah.
like,
And that's what it does. We have lots of guys who come on a Monday night, and it's their social meet.
yeah,
It's their social night out. I work closely with another organisation in Sydney. It's called Walk and Talk for Men, and
mm,
they meet twice a month, and that's how it initially started. And they meet at a local nature reserve, a group of guys, and go for a walk, and they
yeah,
walk and talk. And what that's created from that is they organise their own walks. So not just the two guys that organise the walks, the official walks, they walk themselves. And we went out. There was about three or four of us went out last week for a cycle ride, and we
yeah,
just met up. I said, "Come, let's meet up. Let's go and let's go cycle." My God, it was cold, but hey ho, we coped. But it that's what it does, and it gives people that, like you said, I will never underestimate the support I have. ever, because with my immediate family, and but my circle of friends, I'm not a great friends person. I don't make friends easily.
Yeah,
Um, but because I have been in the past, and especially when I lost my job, I had people that I thought were friends. I haven't heard of since. I haven't
yeah,
heard from since. At all. And then you get the people that actually you weren't that close to, and they're the people that are asking, are making sure you're okay. And so I have a very close and a very tight knit group of friends, but I'm like, I know the ones that I could go to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If I needed help or needed something, they'd be there, and they deal with it. But I also acknowledge that there are people that really genuinely in the world don't have anybody, and
yeah,
that scares me, and that saddens me so much that we have a world and a society like that. you know
yeah. Completely agree. There's been a really good point raised in the chat actually that I'd love to get your opinion on. So
yep.
Shanky makes the point. Um, one of the problems being is that a lot of people are scared to reach out for help for fear of being ridiculed, and I can sort of see where he's coming from there. Especially,
Yeah,
go on, sorry.
I think I would have 100% agreed with that maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah,
Um, you know, but I certainly think today, I think I would be massively disappointed if somebody was ridiculed because of reaching out. I think that we've worked tirelessly and continue to work tirelessly to get rid of that stigma around needing help, mental health, asking for help, whatever else. And I think organisations are slowly but surely. There are still some, don't get me wrong, that play it as a tick box exercise.
yeah,
They look at it and say, "Oh yeah, we've got this in place. Look at this and whatever else," and it's not worth the paper it's written on. There will do, but there are other organisations now that actually, you can do it. You can get help. There is the support out there, and it certainly isn't stigmatized in the way it was. It still isn't perfect, and there's still a long way to go. Um, but I certainly think it's better than it was.
yeah. I mean, I think I sort of
So,
see the where Shanky's coming from, and I think it ties into what I said earlier on about an old-fashioned mindset. Um,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
think this is one of the big problems with men's mental health issues is sometimes I think the sort of mindset is, as men, we sort of have this feeling that, well, we shouldn't be going through a rough time. We shouldn't be finding things difficult. We're supposed to be the providers. We're supposed to be the
yeah,
protectors. Um,
yeah,
and I'll be honest, that was something that I sort of felt for a long time. I knew what I was feeling. I wouldn't necessarily say that I knew why, but I knew what I was feeling. Um, but then I'm trying to tell myself, look, you shouldn't be feeling like this. It's not right. It's not the norm, shall we say?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I'll be honest, it took a lot for me to reach within myself and reach out for that help and realize that actually, there's nothing at all wrong with it.
But,
At the end of the day, I'm
and
human just like anybody else.
yeah, yeah, and that takes a lot of doing, and I know I struggled massively with, that my wife earns more than I do, and I kind of that's taken me a long while to actually, and she will always say, but it's not, it's our money.
Yeah,
She said, it's not my money and it's not your, it's our money, and that's took me along, because I'm like you, I look at my parents, my dad's 86, my mum's 82, and they're of that generation where the man was the provider, and I think, and like I said, I'm, 54, and, maybe I'm still of that, I'm still in that middle bit where I'm not, part of me thinks actually that's what I should be. I should be the provider. I should be the one that's going out to work. I should be the one that's doing earning all the money and whatever else. And and I think actually, no, we're not, are we? Because it's we're trying to live in a world of equality, and we're trying to live in a world where it doesn't matter, and actually it doesn't.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter who it is within the partnership who earns the money. What's that? That's irrelevant, isn't it? And it's where it comes from. And I think that the problem with it is, and I think there's lots of things, is that we have the media side of it that completely seem to have gone the whole hog the other way, and actually you need to slow down a bit. The world's not quite caught up with that feeling yet, that stuff yet. Let's get right what's happening today, not what's going to happen in 10 years time. And it's a different, like I said earlier, it's a manic world. We live in a world. I have to be honest with you, if you'd have asked me or the old days, as I call them, pre-COVID, would we have ever lived in a world like this? No, I didn't think we would. I never thought I'd be part of a lockdown. What's a lockdown? What's that all about?
Yeah.
Where I'm being told where I can and can't go, and what I can and can't do, and and someone's telling me that, and I look at it and think, actually, regardless of what, because one of the topics that we don't talk about Andy's is politics.
Yeah.
And what I would always say is when people say, oh, they blame, the Tory party for how they handled COVID, I said, but they were handling the unknown.
Yeah.
What, it's not like they'd had practice at it previously, or it ever happened before. I said, would anyone else have done it any differently? We don't know, do we? Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
No,
You
of
know,
course.
but you know, but I think we need to get out of this. We really do need to get out of it. It should be just about the person, not what or who the person is, just the person.
Yeah.
And that's the way the world needs to go.
No, of course.
Yeah,
I like you say, those were times that nobody, like absolutely nobody, predicted happening. Um, you can sit there and say, but like I say, would anybody else have handled it differently? Well, maybe, but who's to say that that would have been any better? We can
yeah,
all sit here and say, oh, well, if it was up to me, I'd have done X, Y, and Z. I'm just grateful it
yeah, but
wasn't
only
me
after,
that had to make those
but only
decisions.
after the event, wouldn't they? They're only saying that after the event,
Yeah,
when they
exactly.
know they kind of got a little bit more, a little bit more information, and they're working in. Like I said, hindsight's a wonderful thing. We can all say what we would have done, but what if if it's happening in real time for real? You've got to make a decision. What do you make? How do you make that decision? You're making it on an unknown quantity.
Yeah.
It was an impossible situation for anybody to be in. Yeah,
Yeah, completely agree. Like you say, making decisions like that, I'm just glad it wasn't me that had to make them because, to
yeah.
be
You and
completely
me
honest,
both. Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe that there was any course of action that everybody would have agreed with. They
Of
could
course,
have
of
done.
course.
There could have been
It,
infinite
it,
possibilities. They could have done every single one of them, and people would have
yeah.
disagreed in some way, shape, or form.
It's impossible to please everybody all of the time, isn't it? That's impossible.
Yeah.
That's never happened. That's never happened and it's never going to happen. So yeah,
No, of course not. Um, right, Gary. I'm going to start to wrap things up a little bit.
yep, that's fine by me. Yep,
Now, how can people find out? How can people find out how to find stroke join their local Andy's Man Club? Gary, do you want to take
easy,
that one?
dead easy that one. Go on to the website www.andysmanclub.co.uk and just put in for your nearest group, and it will come up with what the list of groups are. And it will tell you there what your nearest one is. And if you, like I said earlier, if you don't live near one, then if you just email the office, it will give you the email address on the website. If you just email the office, and then they'll give you the link to the online group. So it is so easy, and everybody is made. The beauty with Andy's Man Club is every single group is run in exactly the same way. So if I'm ever away, if I'm on holiday somewhere, or if I'm away, if I'm working away or whatever else, and I can go to any Andy's Man Club in the country, and it will be exactly the same. So it doesn't matter, and that's how it works, and that's the beauty of it. We meet every Monday night between 7 and 9 p.m. with the exception of bank holidays. So we don't meet on bank holidays, and that's purely because some venues that we use are not open on bank holidays. So rather than have to work out which ones are open and which ones are closed, we made the conscious decision that actually we'd all close on a bank holiday, because it's just easier than trying to work out which groups are open and which groups are closed. But yeah, it's dead easy to find out.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Um, Now, is there any one particular message from this conversation that, if the people that have sat and listened to us speak today, is there one particular message that you'd want everybody to take away with them?
I think it would go back to the one I mentioned earlier about, if you're going to ask somebody if they're okay, ask them twice
Yeah,
and make sure you've got time for the answer. Because this person's crying out for help, maybe silently, but they are. And if you don't give them the time, you've got to be prepared that actually there's something wrong. You can see there's something wrong. So be prepared that there is something wrong. So that would be my big one.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
of course. From me personally, I think it'd be a case of, I know obviously a lot of the time the go-to when you're experiencing difficult times, and life's maybe shitting on you once or twice more than what you would deem as fair. I know that the go-to feeling is to think that you're alone with it and think that nobody understands.
Yeah.
And I know it's a very difficult thing to do. Again, speaking from personal experience, I know how difficult it can be. But believe me when I say that you're not. You've got the link there. There's all kinds of available help that's open. And I've always said, ever since I started being so open and honest about mental health issues in the channel, even if you do feel like you haven't got anybody and you need somebody to speak to, you can always drop me a message. I can't always guarantee that I'll respond immediately, but I can make the absolute promise that when I do respond, I will give you as much time as what you need, because people have done it for me. And like
Yeah.
Gary said earlier on, it's if we can help people not only cope with, but potentially avoid going through what we've had to go through, then I will do anything and everything within my power to be able
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah. And I'd echo that. And that bit about, if you do feel like you're alone, just remember there were 2,600 other guys on Monday night who weren't alone. So even if and that's just I think that's just a small minority of the people that are struggling. But that's still a significant figure to show you actually you're not alone,
Yeah,
because these people are. But just get out there, go to a group. There will be guys that will tell you that they've driven past for 3 or 4 weeks, stood outside, they've walked. It's took them ages. The biggest step, the hardest step anyone will take is through that door for the first time. But once they've done it, and I will always say to them, you've done it for the first time. The rest of it is relatively easy after you've done it for the first time. And that's the important thing.
mm.
So,
Right. Well, listen, Gary. Again, I just want to say a massive, massive thank you for taking time out of your evening to come and chat away with me. Um, and obviously, as I said before, the numerous messages of people saying how inspiring it was, listening to us chat away. It's both really encouraging, but also really humbling as well, because we're just
yeah,
two guys that
yeah.
have sat here and had a chat. Do you know what I mean?
Just echoes the power of talk, though, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Because if we like we'll always say, and part of the motto of our charity is, it's that one man. If we've influenced that one man, then it's time well spent, isn't it? So
yeah, 100%. Right. Well, I'll let you get cracking with your evening, Gary. But thanks again for
okay, mate.
coming on and
All
speaking
right,
with us.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Speak soon. Okay, mate.
Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Thanks. Good night. Bye.